Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Monday, May 22nd, 2017 day on our calendar. Today I'm going to look into the Jesuit Vatican agenda in America, the two beasts of Revelation 13, and through the eyes of Edmund Paris in his book, The Secret History of the Jesuits. But before I do that, I have to mention the foreign trip that President Trump is on. They're billing it as a historic trip. His first stop yesterday was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He's now today in Israel. He'll be then moving on to the Vatican. Oh, he's going to meet with Abbas of Palestine. And then he's moving on to kiss the ring of the Pope in the Vatican. And from there he heads up to the EU and Brussels, then back down to a G7 meeting in Sicily before returning back to the White House. Now, starting out with a premise that all wars are orchestrated, that terrorism has been orchestrated. The main theme in his Riyadh speech was to bring together the Sunni Muslims to fight Iran, and that Americans have their back. There's a huge arms deal they just did, about $110 billion, one of the biggest arms deals they signed with Saudi Arabia. And the big theme of that speech, which has been hailed as historic, was to basically bring all of the Sunni Muslim 50 country leaders were there in Riyadh to listen to the speech, and to bring these leaders together to fight terrorism and also to make sure that Iran doesn't create nuclear weapons. Now, Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and I'm going to get back to the American connection to all this in a second, but when did this all start? Before the overthrow of the Shah, Iran was a beautiful country of, there was no terrorism, sponsoring of terrorism prior to the overthrow of the Shah in 1979. And I watched this from the perspective of a European, because I was living in Rome during the time. And it's interesting to note that once Iran changed its policies and began supporting terror, there was terror all over Italy. It was kind of a test zone. And so they're all connected. And it's interesting as we move forward, as I looked at that terrorism in Europe, that's blossomed now to worldwide terrorism. It used to be regional terrorism. And Iran has always been a major player since 1979. Now, the one thing that I find interesting, when you look at the idea that wars are orchestrated, this trip could be significant in a sense that it is billed as a historic trip of peace, one bringing the Sunnis together to fight terrorism, to basically bring a better Middle Eastern world. And then we have Trump now moving to Israel and trying to broker a deal between the Palestinians and in Israel to bring peace there, and using Iran maybe as a wedge. What I mean by that is, if you get the Sunni Arabs behind the Israelis to defeat Iran, you could see a productive outcome. But is that really what's going on? The trip is quite interesting to me because he'll be heading to the Vatican. And if we look at it from a different perspective, could we be seeing the groundwork being laid for a huge conflict? Now, the reason I say that, isn't it interesting that America has, it's kind of like double talk. On one hand, we have American policy with Obama. It changes like the wind, supporting Iran, giving Iran $150 billion and creating a nuclear deal allowing them to create nuclear weapons. And at that time, America shunned the Saudis, shunned Israel, and the Middle East was turned into chaos. And basically because America just turned its back, pulled out of Iraq so that terrorism could grow. Look what happened in Syria with Obama's policies. He left a powder keg. And is this orchestrated? Because America just, I'm in the same America. The American people are getting turned on their heads here with this policy. First, we have a policy supporting terrorism in a sense. Did you see if you looked at what Obama had done, he sent $150 billion on pallets like a drug dealer and gave it to Iran. And where do you think this money's going to? It's insane. It's going right to terrorism. But now that he lost, is it orchestrated? Because now Trump is just the opposite. He's building up the Middle East now, the other side of the story, to fight terrorism, the terrorism they created, that we created. And is his last stop with the Pope? Kind of like he's bringing all these leaders together, or maybe an orchestration of the big conflict to come. As we look on the sidelines, North Korea is sending up missiles and threatening us. Iran says death to America. North Korea says death to America. While China does nothing. In fact, doublespeaks as well, because we realize that China supports North Korea. And China said it will back off and present some financial pressure, but they haven't. They lied. And so where's this big, huge conflict coming? And are we orchestrating it right now? Let's look at the Jesuit Vatican agenda in America through the eyes of Edmund Paris. And I want to put that on for you right now. Here we go. And there'll be an introduction.
Publisher's introduction to the book The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. There is no other person more qualified to introduce Edmund Paris' book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, than Dr. Alberto Rivera, a former Jesuit priest under the extreme oath and induction, who was trained in the Vatican and briefed on the history of the Jesuits. This information is factual and fully documented, and it should be read by every Bible-believing Christian in the United States and Canada. The Bible says, quote, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge," unquote. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. Dr. Rivera's introduction. The most dangerous of men are those who appear very religious, especially when they are organized and in a position of authority. They have the deepest respect of the people who are ignorant of their ungodly push for power behind the scenes.
Okay, and I'm going to interject some things along with this and relate it to the trip that Trump is on. He's billing it as bringing the three major religions together in unity: Islam, Judaism, and he then says Christianity by going to the Vatican. Now let's look at this. What did the Paris just say in his introduction? The most dangerous men hide behind religions. When you go to Riyadh and you speak about Islam and Islamic terror, are we really looking at what the Quran really says? And if you read the Quran, it's a violent book. And I've said this a long time, there is no good side to Islam. Then we move to Israel. Why were they ever put in that position to begin with in 1948? Do you realize one of our first assassinations was a man by the name of Forrestal, who was our defense secretary, and he was opposed to creating a state of Israel, because you're kind of like putting them in the middle of, like surrounding them in an effort to create this kind of chaos and war. And then you got all the Jews rounded up, just like they were rounded up in Poland during World War II. Then we move to the biggest lie on this trip. First, by calling Christianity Catholicism. He's moving into the Vatican, a pagan building. It has nothing to do with Christianity. So listen what Paris just said. The most dangerous of men are those of the religious persuasion of the major religions. That's what he's congregated. Look at he just brought all of these religious imams together in Saudi Arabia. Then he went, the first sitting president, to go to the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. And he put his hand on there, and he was with the high leaders of Judaism. And now he's going to visit the Antichrist beast. What are they planning? Let's get back to Edmund Paris.
These religious men who pretend to love God will resort to murder, incite revolution and wars if necessary to help their cause. They are crafty, intelligent, smooth, religious politicians who live in a shadowy world of secrets, intrigue, and phony holiness. This pattern, seen in the secret history of the Jesuits, spiritually speaking, can be seen in the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees at the time of Jesus Christ. This same evil spirit directed by the Roman emperors to issue the 10 murderous decrees to persecute the early Christian church. The, quote, early fathers, unquote, observed most of the ancient Babylonian system plus Jewish theology and Greek philosophy. They all perverted most of the teachings of Christ and his apostles. They paved the way for the Roman Catholic machine that was to come into existence. Piously, they attacked, perverted, added to, and took away from the Bible. This religious Antichrist spirit working through them is seen again when Ignatius de Loyola created the Jesuits to secretly accomplish two major goals for the Roman Catholic institution. 1. Universal political power, and 2. A universal church in fulfillment of the prophecies of Revelation chapters 6, 13, 17, and 18. By the time Ignatius de Loyola arrived on the scene, the Protestant Reformation had seriously damaged the Roman Catholic system. Ignatius de Loyola came to the conclusion that the only way his, quote, church, unquote, could survive was by enforcing the canons and doctrines on the temporal power of the Pope and the Roman Catholic institution. Not by just destroying the physical life of the people alone, as the Dominican priests were doing through the Inquisition, but by infiltration and penetration into every sector of life. Protestantism must be conquered and used for the benefit of the popes. That was Ignatius de Loyola's personal proposal, among others, to Pope Paul III. Jesuits immediately went to work, secretly infiltrating all the Protestant groups, including their families, places of work, hospitals, schools, colleges, etc. Today, the Jesuits have almost completed that mission. The Bible puts the power of a local church into the hands of a godly pastor. But the cunning Jesuits successfully managed over the years to remove that power into the hands of denomination headquarters and have now pushed all the Protestants denominations into the arms of the Vatican. This is exactly what Ignatius de Loyola set out to accomplish: a universal church and the end of Protestantism. As you read the secret history of the Jesuits, you will see there is a parallel between the religious and political sectors. The author, Mr. Paris, reveals the penetration and infiltration of the Jesuits into the governments and nations of the world to manipulate the course of history by setting up dictatorships and weakening democracies, such as the United States of America, by paving the way for social, political, moral, military, educational, and religious anarchy.
Especially I work in dealing with the infiltration of churches and religious institutions as well as government. That cover a tremendous number of institutions.
And the purpose of that infiltration was what for?
The purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government.
Simply put, this country and this world benefit from your commitment to Jesuit principles, to being men.
As a graduate of another great Jesuit institution, Xavier University, I have great affection for the value and purpose of the Jesuit education.
What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously.
What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Holy Father, on behalf of Michelle and myself, welcome to the White House.
There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government. Of course, both, because you can see that even the Pope and his own individual office, he meet those requirements. He is not only the head of his church, as he called himself, John Paul II, the present Pope. He said he is the pastor of his church. He is not only that, but he is the head of his estate.
It is a sign, perhaps, of how far we have come in this country that today's news of formal recognition between the governments of the United States and the Vatican did not create a furor. Once upon a time, it would have. Once upon a time, and not all that long ago, it did.
From the time of President Washington, there was the first president to be utilized by the Jesuits. If you were not aware of that, President Washington already was initiated by the Jesuits to bring about the first communication with the Vatican ever known in this country. From there on, President Reagan, throughout all this time, President Reagan has come to fulfill the greatest moment in the history of this conspiracy, because no other president has come as close as President Reagan with the Vatican, and even not even John F. Kennedy. What that means is they have done to President Kennedy and to President Reagan what they were not able to do even through a Roman Catholic president. And nevertheless, I will say this: the religious belief of President Kennedy is nothing more, nothing else than another expression of Catholicism. Perhaps I need to clear this. Roman Catholicism is not only the Roman Catholic system. Roman Catholicism is still, and it has been at work outside the Roman Catholic system. What that means, there are many daughters of the Roman Catholic system outside the Roman Catholic system. And as there are many daughters, these daughters have children, and of course President Reagan fit within that picture. His relationship with the Vatican today brought about several things. One of them is First, the diplomatic relationship with the Vatican. Second, the preparation for the signature of a concordat between the Vatican and the United States. And if you want to know, this never took place overnight. President Reagan was prepared and is here for the task that is performing today as President of the United States by the Jesuits of Rome and the time that he served as a star in a movie that was very well known and still being shown today, a very old movie about the football team of Notre Dame.
New York name.
That's correct. This is the time that the first contact was made by the Jesuits with Reagan.
On the way back from London on the jet plane, and there was a man dressed in a uniform like the Catholic priests wear, and he was conducting himself not like a priest you'd see in a movie, very friendly. He was a very sophisticated type man, and people could sense that. And I never thought I'd see him again, but in Baltimore at the airline station where the baggages come off, well, I turned around and there he was next to me. And I just turned to him and said, "Hello, friend. Are you a Jesuit?" And he says, "Yes." With a big smile. You see all of his teeth. And he was very happy with himself. I said, "Well, listen, I'm very interested in the Jesuits. I've read some about them. And what would you think about the Council of Trent and what was invented in the Council of Trent and the infiltration of the Jesuits into Protestantism and the use of the Jesuits through organizations like the Illuminati and the futurism theory, the secret rapture that they invented for the Protestants?" And I talked about a lot of those things, and he had a metamorphosis take place. His face became rigid, his smile went away, and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "You know quite a bit, don't you?" Like he never expected it. And I told him that I was one of the Protestants that got away, and if he could realize that if somebody like me knew those things, just imagine some of the other of God's people that know those things and are willing to tell anybody about them. And it was an amazing situation how that man's face changed, and he thought he was like in one identity, but all of a sudden he realized that these dark secrets of theirs, they're being found out. And I'll never forget that. Would you consider that Jesuitism to be an occult secret society?
It is an occult secret society from the point of view that the Jesuit order, what you know of the Jesuit order and what everybody knows of the Jesuit order is not the true Jesuit order. What that means is even the Jesuits within the Jesuit order, they all are not knowing the secret society, the inner secret society that they are surrounded by.
And I said, well, what are you guys exactly doing in here? What are you doing in there? And they said, well, we're here with the advance team from the Vatican, and we're here to train the U.S. Senate on what specifically the Pope's climate change agenda is about and educate them as to what we're trying to achieve. And that's when I said to them, I said, I read the Pope's climate change encyclical, and I noticed that the Pope mentions the Sabbath in the encyclical. And he talks about animals having a day of rest, and I'm putting two and two together, and it looks to me like the Pope wants to have a Sabbath rest for the land, a Sabbath rest for the environment.
Okay, I got to take a break. We'll come back with more of the Jesuit Vatican agenda in America on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this May 22nd, 2017 day on our calendar. And, you know, never before in the history, we all know the Jesuits have had world power centers all over the place in the last 500 years, but never have they fully taken control of America like they have. It's an amazing thing. Even the Pope now is a Jesuit. He talked to Congress and came over here and was treated like the king of the world. They've also successfully taken control of CERN, the Lucifer binocular telescope in Arizona. It's the most powerful telescope on Earth. And finally, through Trump and Pence, they now have the White House as well. And never before in the history of the world have Jesuits run everything. They now do. And prophecy is being fulfilled. Let's go to Walter Veith, who made that statement. And, no, he did not make that statement. It was a comment regarding one of his presentations, and I repeated it so that you can get an idea how big a trouble we're really in. But let's listen to a presentation Veith did called Jesuits Have Seized the White House. Here we go. Here we go.
During the swing to the other side so that you can get exactly what you want and what prophecy predicts. Obama is the one who said the future must not belong to those who slander the prophet of Islam. Now, if you look at the web pages, there's so much conjecture as to whether the man was perhaps a clandestine Muslim. And there are pictures of his ring, which tends to be Islamic, and there are pictures of him in Islamic dress, and many, many statements to this effect. And if you look at the administration, many high officials are of the Muslim faith. So it seems as if America was being taken away from its Christian roots and swung in another direction. But prophecy said that the second beast, the United States of America, would implement legislation that would further the first beast, which is Catholicism. And therefore it must be a Christian nation bringing about Christian legislation. And here you had Obama taking the mindset in a totally opposite direction. This is a brilliant Hegelian dialectic. Whether he knew about what he was doing, whether he did it consciously, or whether he did it subconsciously is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, this is what has happened. I believe, of course, that the insider elite is pretty clued up as to what the agenda is, but nevertheless, one can leave open the option that they might have done it unknowingly. But this was the legacy. And now, with the Trump administration, we are going to probably see the pendulum swing. Catholic Herald, Obama calls for world leaders to heed Pope Francis's message. The President of the United States said he wants fellow world leaders to reflect on Pope Francis' encyclical talking about the environment. So you have this dichotomy of thought. On the one hand, you have this movement towards a totally different religious system, and on the other hand, you have this underpinning of the papal system. And under his leadership, you had the visit of Pope Francis, where he went through the entire procedure almost like a president of the world being inaugurated, speaking from the balcony, which is a step higher than any of the presidents have done. So you have this dichotomy of thought. You have, on the one hand, the appearance that it's moving in this direction, and on the other hand, the realities of the laws that it's moving in another direction. And then you had the two opponents. You had the one standing for the principles of the right, the other one standing for the principles on the left, and it was a vicious campaign. Now, is this a dialectic, a Hegelian dialectic? Is this a game of good cop, bad cop, or two ideologies which are to undergo pendulum swing? Well, let's have a look at some of the facts without judging any of the individuals and see whether we can come up with some form of conclusion. Here we have the famous supper, the so-called charity supper that takes place just before the election, where you have the Archbishop of New York, who always is the head of the Knights of Malta, in America, where he has this meal with the candidates that are to be elected for president. And you can see the jovial nature. This is church and state at its best. And the two of them smiling next to Cardinal Dolan. Now it's interesting when you look at the actions of these individuals, you also get this idea of this dialectic. I mean, if you take the Cardinal, for example, the papacy will make one statement, a very conservative statement, let's say, with regard to whatever, lifestyle choices or contraception. The papacy will make one statement, and the people who are supposed to live it out will do exactly the opposite. So you're confused. You're thinking, why are the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta doing the exact opposite of what the papacy has just proclaimed? Why do you have this dichotomy of thought? Well, you see, in this thinking, there's this yin-yang aspect. The white aspect and the black aspect, well, they augment each other. The one cannot exist without the other, so they say, in this yin-yang philosophy. So even within the ranks of the church, you have this dichotomy of thought. Now, the two candidates, as we will see, fit the bill in every single aspect. If you go to the web pages and you look at the bloodlines of the American presidents, then it is a known fact that all the presidents that have, reigned in the United States have all been related. So let's have a look at what the media has to say. If all presidents are related, which of the 2017 candidates will be the next president? As it turns out, both Trump and Hillary Clinton are related to John of Gaunt, a 14th century royal. Gaunt was the first Duke of Lancaster, was the son of King Edward III. According to MyHeritage, Trump is related through his mother, Mary Ann McLeod, back to his 17th grandfather, John Beaufort, while Clinton is related through her father and the Rodham family back to the 17th great-grandmother, Joan Beaufort. The two candidates are 19th cousins, and so they both have the right bloodlines to continue this lineage. Now, that's another story as to why they should all be related, and it's fascinating that the Bible doesn't speak about the presidents of the world, it speaks about the kings of the world. And it really, over the course of history, hasn't mattered which of the candidates has won, because the candidates have always both been in the same bloodlines. Here are the American presidential bloodlines. Here's another page that explains this. Did you know all 44 U.S. presidents have carried European royal bloodlines into office? 34 have been genetic descendants of just one person, Charlemagne, the brutal 8th century king of the Franks. Now, that's a fascinating story, because Charlemagne is, of course, the one who was crowned emperor of the Roman Empire, the new Roman Empire, and the Pope was crowning him whilst his kingdom was falling apart. So he's a symbol of this unity of the world under one leadership, the papacy. And then if we go to Edward III of England, in fact, the presidential candidates with the most royal genes has won every single American election. Now, it seems as if Trump and Hillary had exactly the same lineage, so it didn't really matter which one of the two won. This information comes from Burke's Peerage, which is the Bible of aristocratic genealogy based in London. Every presidential election in America since and including George Washington in 1789 to Bill Clinton has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. Of the 42 presidents to Clinton, 33 have been related to two people, Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of France. So it goes on. 90 of them are related to England's Edward III and has 2,000 blood connections to Prince Charles. The same goes with the banking families in America. George Bush and Barbara Bush are from the same bloodline, the Pierce bloodline, which changed its name from Percy when it crossed the Atlantic. Percy is one of the aristocratic families of Britain to this day. They were involved in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament at the time of Guy Fawkes. Now that's even more fascinating, because that was a Jesuit plot to overthrow the Protestant government in the United States. So if all these bloodlines belong to these individuals that overthrew Protestantism, well, that would be an interesting plot for the puppet masters to work on behind the scenes. But we're just looking at the facts, so let's continue. The Mail online predicted or showed that The Simpsons predicted a Donald Trump presidency, and it didn't end well. Time travel episode from 2000 featured broke nation relied on aid from China. Now, as we have seen in some of the previous series that we have made, The Simpsons the writers of The Simpsons are all probably insider individuals with more knowledge about what is going to happen in the world than most would deem possible. And as some candidates have said in the past, if something works out the way that it has worked out, it works out that way because it was planned that way. So there is that element, but there is also, of course, an element of luck maybe involved as well. Now, The Simpsons generally use many esoteric symbols in their productions, and they have been extremely accurate on a number of issues and have predicted many things that seemed unlikely or impossible years in advance. 9/11 being a case in point, the destructive events in the United States, and in their particular little issues, 16 years before this presidential election, they showed their character in the same dress as Hillary Clinton would be wearing, including the necklace, including the earrings, and that's rather fascinating. It's interesting that she actually wins the next election, but according to their scenario, Donald Trump would win the current election. So that's rather fascinating, and some of the statements and the ideologies that were contrasted there are, well, very strange to say the least. This comes from the year 2000, and they showed Trump in his red tie and his jacket between the flags, and this happened in reality. So they're pretty accurate. But it gets even more bizarre because they show that Trump, that's in 2000, greeting the people in Trump Towers, going down the escalator, raising his hand, and again he has the red tie and the suit on. And reality, 2015, Trump greeting the crowds, going down the escalator of Trump Towers. I mean, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty sharp. Now, whether this is pure coincidence or whether it is not is actually irrelevant. Some of the more bizarre ones, rather interesting, are the maps that we will see in a moment. And you can see their character here saying, oh no, it's actually come true. And this is the map that has been going around where they show what the distribution of the votes would be, but this is actually not quite accurate because this one was actually one that they used in the Romney campaign, so it doesn't apply to that previous one. But nevertheless, it's interesting that they show these red demographics, and of course this picture has changed in the present one, so you can not really use this one. Now let's have a look at some other facts, because what we are interested in is prophecy and not the games and the dialectics that are being played in this world. The National Catholic Reporter tells us that Mike Pence, who is going to be the Vice President of the United States, which is a very, very powerful figure, is a born-again evangelical Catholic. And the web pages in the world tell us this very thing. Now, that's somewhat of a misnomer, and a few years ago, that would not have been a possibility. To be a born-again evangelical Catholic would be considered an oxymoron. It would be impossible. In my youth, that would have been impossible. But the religious landscape has changed, and there's been such a merging of Catholicism and Protestantism that this contradiction in terms is today a common reality. So a born-again evangelical Catholic Catholic. They say that he was a rather dedicated Catholic. Mike Pence, he was an altar boy and very dedicated. And what about Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump attended an Ivy League school, so let's ask the Washington Post something about his background. When he was young, he went to the private Kew Forest School in Forest Hills, Queens, where his father, Frederick, a very wealthy real estate developer, was on the governing board. Behavior problems led Donald's exit from the school, at which point he was sent to New York Military Academy at the age of 13 by his parents, who hoped the discipline of the school would channel his energy in a positive manner. He did well there and went to Fordham University, a Jesuit school in the Bronx. So Donald Trump tries to downplay his Fordham experience and rather to upplay his later experiences. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania and studied economics for 2 years. So he did attend a Jesuit school, which is interesting. That's just one of the facts. Now let's go back to Mike Pence again. Postmodern evangelical Catholic conservative. But Pence is also very much a creation of the last half century of American political religious life. Born and raised Catholic, he became a Catholic youth minister and reportedly wanted to be a priest. But according to interviews, Pence has given over the years, interestingly, has more recently declined to talk specifically about his spiritual evolution. While in college from 1978 to 81, he began blending his Catholicism with evangelical Protestantism. I made a commitment to Christ, Pence said. I'm a born-again evangelical Catholic. So here we have a Catholic vice president who is in a position to reach out to evangelicals. Now it's fascinating that the other side, of course, had chosen Tim Kaine as their vice president. And the two met in debate, and apparently Mike Pence was the stronger candidate in that debate, or so they say. But nevertheless would have made any difference, because both of these are Catholic gentlemen. And let's have a look what the Harvard Divinity School tells us about Tim Kaine and Mike Pence and faith. It says that Kaine was educated at a Jesuit high school and has been influenced throughout his life by Jesuits. Often seen as progressive and open-minded in the U.S., he's also been called a Pope Francis Catholic. What does it mean to be a liberal Catholic reformer? Now, this is rather fascinating. So you have these high-profile Catholics as vice presidents, the one wanting to be a priest and was an altar boy, and the other one, all his training in Jesuit environments. Now, it's interesting that the Jesuits themselves say, or Ignatius Loyola said, that if you have to choose sides, then a Jesuit can choose one side and represent it to the point of death, while a fellow Jesuit may choose the opposite side and defend that to the point of death. That is the Hegelian dialectic, and it's fascinating how it works. So it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become the vice president, and it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become president. Now, before I even talked about this, I thought that Hillary Clinton would probably fit the modern profile somewhat better, but I also said it doesn't matter which one of them wins. But now on reflection, it becomes rather interesting that it went the way it went. Now, in the discussion here with these people from Harvard, Donald Trump's running mate, Governor Mike Pence, described himself as a born-again evangelical Catholic. Is this an unusual faith mix? And what does this combination Christians say about his public service? And the answer? I'm not quite sure what Governor Pence intends to affirm by a born-again evangelical Catholic. He comes from an Irish Catholic background, was raised as such during college, Indiana, Hanover College. He had an evangelical religious experience under the influence of a non-denominational group. However, in the following years, he still considered himself a Catholic, went to Mass, worked as a youth minister at a Catholic church, and even thought of becoming a priest. However, in the mid-1990s, he joined the Grace Evangelical Church, which is affiliated with the Evangelical Free Church in America. One could describe it as a Baptist denomination. It was, however, the church to which he started to take his family in Indianapolis. At that time, he described himself as a Christian, conservative, Republican, in that order. In this description, the word Catholic was not present. So, when we look at these two, they are both capable of fulfilling the prophetic agenda. Pope Francis calls for unity between evangelicals, Catholics, and he said that division is the work of the devil. So they had to be brought together. So Pence is actually...
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.